Welcome to Mastering vSphere 6. We're doing the final chapter, which is more about automating the VMware vSphere 6 processes. It's about using the tools to help make managing and using vSphere more efficiently. So, automation tools, they are made for the administrator so that they can increase things like efficiency, accuracy, and capacity. The nice thing with virtualization is you're educated gambling with resources because you can do ballooning. You can always go above and beyond. So there's lots of things that you can do. So capacity within automation, normally you can save hours, normally within weeks. Uh, Even just like creating templates, things like of that nature, you're definitely drastically changing how often you're doing work. The automation options are things like the Power CLI, the vSphere's management assistant called the VMA, the Realize Orchestrator, and the software development kit. Well, I've used the Power CLI, the vRealize Orchestrator, and the management assistant. I have not really used the software development kit very much, but I do know that that's one of the more powerful tools that are there if you do use it. The Power CLI is one of the easiest tools for automating. It's very similar to Windows PowerShell. It actually uses PowerShell as a foundation. So it's the Microsoft standard automation platform. It talks to vSphere's APIs. It uses commandlets and objects, very similar to PowerShell. It's compiled in .NET Framework. So normally a verb hyphen a singular noun, get something, action to an object. So the objects are also containers of properties. So get VM, that would be the container of that property. VM would be the container of those properties. You can also use variables. So that's always, because PowerShell allows for the use of variables. PowerShell is a programming language. Well, a combination of several programming languages. Again, it's compiled in .NET Framework, which is very similar to things like C and VB. Not exactly the same, but similar. Where if you can program in VB and C, you can, for the most part, do a lot in PowerShell. One of the nice additive features in PowerCLI and PowerShell is you can pipeline stuff. You can use a pipe. So here we have a Git cluster name, and you pipe in Git VM hosts, and you can start doing specific additional specifications where $underscore.connection state equals maintenance. So it would pull the cluster, a specific cluster name. It would pull all of the hosts that are in maintenance mode. So VMware's Power CLI requirements does require a Windows machine, PowerShell at least version 2, and the appropriate .NET frameworks. The first commandment that any Power CLI user has to know is going to be connect via server. That just allows us to connect to a virtual server. This commandlet has, again, lots of different features for connecting to our vCenter and our ESXIs. Server and credentials are two of the subcommands. Get VM hosts, and then you can actually pull specific items. You can pipe in a set and set up a syslog server if you want. So let's move more into the VMA features. VMA is a virtual appliance that's preloaded with CLI and vSphere's software development kit for Perl. It provides the vCenter, the VMware's administrator, with tools that you're accustomed to and a better service console. In 5, it was kind of horrible, but with 6, there's been a lot of improvements. The virtual CLI is available to install separate from the VMA, and you can do that both on Linux and Windows if you chose to. So executing commands can become tedious and very quickly because you're constantly entering the username and password to connect to different servers for every command. Easy to fat finger, or easy to jeopardize security because, again, depending on your environment, someone watching you enter the credentials over and over and over, easily be able to pick them up. So one workaround is to wrap the command in a bash shell. Gotta love Linux. And other type of features within the VMA does allow for fast passing functions, so you don't have to constantly enter credentials. You can also embed credentials in your scripts, so it makes it a little bit easier. So what's this fast passing? Fast passing allows you to treat the VMA command line as you would a native ESXi host. So you can actually do a VIFP address or ad server, then its particular host name or IP address, and you can treat this as a separate ESXi host in your environment. That way you don't have to keep entering credentials. So the command at your VMA would be VIFP target, however an S would give you your vSphere, should be your vSphere or your vCenter, and then you can do additional commands based off of your individual requirements. Here we have the example that we're adding a virtual switch, adding a VNIC to that switch, naming that switch, and then assigning ports to that switch. So using our vCLI to manage our vCenter, through FastPass, vCenter allows you to no longer add each individual host to FastPass. You can specify the additional command line parameters though. So you can do not individually, but you can add them in groups. The ESX CLI is used for more host-based activities, where the Power CLI you can do a little bit more with. 5 different namespaces for the ESX CLI. Honestly, the ones that I've noticed that are the most useful: devices, the ESX CLI, graphics, hardware, and iSCSI. I don't use Fiber Channel, I use iSCSI, so the FCOE really isn't where I've done a lot of my work. iSCSI's been that. Things like network, software storage system, and vSAN, just because those are some of the CLIs that I've had to become more familiar with just with easeability and scripting. That way I can kind of help automate my vSphere environment a lot easier. Moving on is into vRealize Orchestrator. vRealize Orchestrator, also called VRO, is a process automation tool that comes bundled with vCenter. Although it's installed by default, you still must configure it for use with vCenter. Most people do not do this. I don't even think that we have a lab doing this, but it's an integral component to other VMware products, like vRealize Automation, which that's a paid additional item. You can leverage its own embedded Postgres database requirements. Sorry, Postgres or other external database requirements. Just kind of depends on how you want. vRealize does require and does support LDAP, so you can integrate it with Active Directory. Here is the configuration wizard. So you can do several different things like its setup, authentication, database, certificate manager, licensing, Mel. Mel is a big one here. This is actually where I've done a lot more of my Mel features in VMware's Orchestrator. Notice vCenter Server 5.5, where instead of 6. So to configure vRealize Orchestrator, you use plugins to architect the add functionality and connectivity. Because it becomes default, it does come with a default set of plugins. You have to have admin access to install all of them, but it's very similar to PowerShell. You can always add new plugins, and plugins are becoming more readily available on a regular basis. You can always look at VMware's Solution Exchange for additional plugins for vOrchestrator. So again, vOrchestrator, you can do lots of workflows. It comes with a plethora of libraries that are pre-installed for the different workflows. Again, it's all about being able to add manageability and automate it, make it a little bit easier for you. I believe I will be doing some vRealize orchestrating labs coming up. I don't know how soon that will be, but my goal is to definitely get some vRealize orchestrator labs. The nice thing is Orchestrator can do some really complex interactive workflows if you spend the time to build them into it. Not even build them into it, pretty much just to configure vRealize. Once you've done that, you can implement a lot of the pre-built tasks and workflows. You just have to bother to implement Orchestrator. With a little practice passing information between the existing workflows, you'll be able to quickly increase how quickly you can automate and how quickly you can start doing additional, more complex tasks. So once you've developed your own workflows, you can make them available through vCenter and to other vCenter users through the vSphere as a web client. After you've successfully associated the workflows with objects, you can now start using those workflows with those objects. So let's end this with a real-world example. So the scenario is you return from lunch on Friday to a frantic voicemail from one of the department heads in your organization. A initiative has been underway to overhaul a major application that the department depends on. A consultant is coming in on Monday morning to deploy the application in an isolated development environment. There has been discussion about creating this environment, but it has not been done yet. Naturally, you protest, but agree to work on the project throughout the weekend. You basically need to set up that new work environment. The weekend end comes dramatically different depending on the amount of automation implemented in your environment. If you've automated the deployment of a new virtual machine, implementation of new VLANs, additional accounts, access permissions, you may be able to accomplish many of these tasks within a few hours as opposed to spending the entire weekend. I think that's a huge over-exaggeration. All depend on your environment, but essentially, if you've automated several of the processes to develop VMs, VLANs, virtual switches, you could be talking a day's worth of work or minutes worth of work. And that's some of the things that you can do with vRealize. That's the end of this chapter. I want to thank you.